Hello and welcome to week 11 in research methods and our last chapter in terms of the chapter content in this class, and we are looking at chapter 13. Presumably 13 is unlucky, but I actually, when I was writing the course book and I came to this point, I was like, the heck with it. Statistics tell us that 13 is actually not any more lucky or unlucky than any other number, so I'm going to go with it. Chapter 13, looking at other research designs that you might come in contact with. We've been talking about correlations. We've been talking about just data gathering right at the beginning, correlations. We start getting into cause-effect relationships with the various kinds of experiments and different groups and within designs, without designs, all of those things. And now we come to a set of techniques that are used, as certain modifications on those particular kind of data gathering instruments that we all kind of collectively look at as other ways in which we gather information. And the first one that comes up is, of course, the case study. Largely a big part of the origins of psychology, as I talk about Freud's work and whatnot, was on case studies. We still do case studies today. We could do case studies on an individual, but you could look at a case study like a school. Like a school would be a single example of a school. It's still a case study, even though there's a lot of people in there. The subject is the school. So we can look at institutions that way. We can look at law. The effect of a law would be a case study of the effect of a law in a particular state. That word case study, don't just think about an individual. Now, oftentimes it is an individual, and we use that to explore an anomaly, a rarity in an individual. Let's say we're going to do a study on extreme intelligence. We'd find, a person who has those kinds of abilities and do a study on that individual as an example of that extreme. So the generalizability of that is very minimal. Whatever we find out about that person is probably pretty unique to that person. You really can't judge others or, make any conclusions about other people's behavior. The second one really has to do with, second and third actually, have to do with how characteristics change over time. Once we add that developmental perspective, we get into longitudinal and cross-sectional research. Now, longitudinal research, looking at individuals over periods of time, really the period of time can be just a week, considered a longitudinal study. Usually, however, we follow individuals, collect data from them over time, over maybe years, maybe decades. In the cross-sectional one, what we're doing is we're doing a study, but our independent variable, the groups that individuals belong to, are age groups. Okay? Now, so we might say we're going to do a study on use of social media, and we're going to look at 7th graders, 8th graders, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So we're going to have those different groups, but the difference between them is age. So when we add that piece to it, it's a cross-sectional study. We're looking at how things change over time, but across different age groups. Now, we can also mix those up. We could, for example, do a study of 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and we could follow all of them until the 7th graders become 12th graders. That would be a combination of a cross-sectional and longitudinal study. You could do a longitudinal study on a case study. Could follow one individual over time. And biographies themselves are exactly that. You've taken developmental psych. If you've taken developmental psych here, you have conducted a case study. The biography assignment and the reflection on the biography is essentially a longitudinal case study. And so the combination of those. The last one that I mentioned in the course book is what are called small n studies. And that's when we're looking at small groups of people. We're not really seeking the notion of data that we can generalize to the population. We need good sample size. That's the n. N sample, is your sample size, in order to take what you've learned and say something about the general population, you usually need a representative sample. We can study groups of people, and we can study them using all of the other methods and having that as a small n. And all it does, it changes our statistics. It changes what we can do in terms of talking about generalizations or whatnot. Let me throw all of this together. Let's say an anthropologist wants to study an isolated tribe that exists on an island out in the Pacific. So you have a small group of people, small n. You could study them over time, longitudinal. You could look at different age groups within there, cross-sectional, and you can do case studies on particular individuals with roles within that society. You can combine all of those into one study using all of these different methodologies about understanding that population. In fact, that's a lot of what anthropologists do. They look at small groups, they look at how they experience that, and then just to whatever degree they can then translate that into an understanding of a full nature of culture in society. So here we have these other methods that we can use to gather information and draw conclusions about our hypotheses. So that brings us to Chapter 13 quiz, which is just an exercise in transitioning a study to a longitudinal study, talking about the risks and benefits of that and getting into that. And that ends our content in the course book. Now, what we have left in the next couple weeks here is finishing up your research projects. People are all over the map right now in terms of how far along they are in terms of getting this stuff done. This is really the last couple miles of this particular journey. It's really important to buckle down and get those assignments into me, get the corrections into them. I'm keeping up on grading, particularly with the special assignments and getting those in there. I know that I have some meetings with some people. We have a couple individuals that are collecting data as we speak. They'll be moving into the last few of those things. I will be probably, and getting into it next week, I think, is talking about the final assignment, which was a poster presentation. I'm actually going to convert that live in the class. It's in the next edition. I've converted it to a recorded presentation with a PowerPoint or a slideshow, keynote or whatever, but recording a narration on top of that slideshow. And the slideshow covers every section of your paper. And it's really sort of monotonous. You don't read the screen, but you have, your introduction, and then you have your literature review, and then you have your methods, and then you have your results, and then you have your conclusions, where you talk about your study. Be going a little bit into that next week. Nobody's at that point yet, so you still have some time. Get the other stuff done. All of the papers that you've been writing, all the special assignments related to your research project will all be coming together into a single narrative, your final written project. So these have been ordered in a way that you're exploring the areas in order as they would appear in your final paper. So it's important to then, I've left notifications to people, it's not a copy paste. It is a getting through those ideas, but your final paper first, it's in third person. You talk about, you don't say I will. It's in past tense. So this is what we did, or the study did, or this is what was studied, because it's after the fact. You're changing all that around. You're not talking about some of the information that I was asking on the original assignment. You're translating it into a paper that would be introduction, lit review, hypotheses, methods, results, discussion, whatever it says in the course book. I'm not looking at that right now. But the following those sections all one clear narrative talking about your paper. It's not that really long of a paper because your studies have been they haven't been comprehensive. They've been fascinating and interesting, but they're not at the kind of level that we'd be looking at for publishing. So don't worry about the length of the paper. Your methods section might only be a couple paragraphs long. Your results section might be a paragraph and maybe a table or two to go along with that. So don't worry about the length. What you're worried about is getting that sequence into that final paper of all this information that we've been working on all semester. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that data come, seeing some of you bring your projects up to collecting data so we can get this class done in a timely fashion. So please reach out if you have any questions about things. I've been leaving extensive comment in the drop boxes. Make sure that you're going by those and making those corrections. And let's see if we can end this course beautifully. I anticipate we will. So I look forward to hearing from you as you're exploring these last aspects of the class here. I believe there's no more discussions. So if you have anything, post it in the course lounge. So we're all done with those discussion things. And I will look forward to working with each of you on completing your research projects. So take care and have a great week.